Alright, I'm gonna say it. I had to eat crow this time. I'm gonna eat crow. It was alright. It was alright. How's it going, everybody? Black Widow review here. From yours truly, it's Jerome from The First Ones to Die. You might be saying to yourself, why isn't this going to be a whole podcast episode? I thought y'all love the Marvel stuff. We do, but we don't want to watch everything. We're kind of superheroed out, so I took the brunt to volunteer to watch this one. So, yeah, man, I watched Black Widow. And off the bat, I have to say I was not very excited for Black Widow. It's just, and it's not, it has nothing to do with Scarlett Johansson or even her performance, but rather just that Black Widow to me has never been like a character I've been really into. And on top of that, Black Widow's never really been a character that I felt like, on a movie, scale, would make it for an interesting film. Just because she doesn't have any powers. And her character is based off of that, femme fatale Russian spy idea, back in the day. So it's like, if you've seen Red Sparrow, if you've seen Salt, if you've seen even, Atomic Blonde to a degree, like you've seen the Black Widow movie, more or less, is kind of where my thinking was at. That being said, though, the trailers did make it seem like they were going to try and at least do some things a little different, big it up a little bit, maybe add some more flavor to it. But the thing is that, it still wasn't like, amazing. Now, granted, it's a lot better than I thought it was going to be. It was a lot better than I thought it was going to be, especially that first half. That first half was really solid. It was, it kind of took the Black Widow character and put her more in the political thriller light, kind of like Winter Soldier a little bit. So it felt like, we were already down a pretty solid path as far as, hitting the ground running. Also, for those who don't know, this movie is a prequel. It takes place between Captain America Civil War and Infinity War. So go into there knowing that. So don't worry about them messing with continuity or anything like that. Like it's it's a prequel, so it takes place before. However, that being said, though, this movie is pretty self-contained. Like there's very little to no relation to any of the other characters. It's not like you're gonna get any major cameos. Tony Stark doesn't show up, Captain America don't show up, Hawkeye's like mentioned, but he doesn't show up, and he's the one character that is the closest tie to Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow. So don't expect like a huge bunch of Marvel tie-ins in this movie. This really is just the Scarlett Johansson show. Kind of, and we'll get into that in a bit. Again, the other thing that impressed me about the first half is also how serious this movie gets. They really do dive in to some dark stuff in regards to Black Widow's character, but also to just the idea of the Black Widow program in general. And I think they do a really good job of handling it very maturely, and also not like hammering your head over how sad it is. They don't spend the whole runtime being like, man, isn't this sad? Look how sad this is. This is so sad. It's like, no, they're just like, look, you see it. If you have a heart, visually, you already know this is a rough situation. And, they just let that kind of depth and subtext be there and expect you as the audience member to kind of just like, understand it without them having to say it. And I respect that. I respect a movie that can respect the audience enough to handle mature themes without having to say too much. So, good on you, Black Widow. Off the bat, too, the story for this one is pretty okay. Like I said, that first half starts pretty well with like the introduction of the mystery. I think where it falters is that second half, because the first half feels very grounded. I think the thing they really wanted to do with Black Widow is to make it feel very down to earth, considering that she's a character, like I said, with no superpowers. So they kind of want her to feel like the average person, even though she has like spy training and and all that stuff, it still doesn't change the fact that she's still a person, you know? She's still a human being. She doesn't have any super soldier serum, nothing like that. So it is what it is. But it's that second half that then things start to get a little goofy, and not because it's like ridiculous or anything like that. It's just it gets so big and huge in scope that it starts to hit the point where it starts being kind of like old school James Bond a little bit. And I don't mean like the good old school James Bond. I mean like the Moonrakers and stuff like that. The stuff where it's like, I'm sorry, are we in space now? Not that this movie goes to space, but just in the, you know, to fit with the analogy of Moonraker, it's that kind of level of ridiculousness where it's like, all right, like now we've gone like way over levels of proportion of this feeling like a grounded, normal spy thriller film. So I think that's it. Weighs the story down, because, you know, you really start out pretty solid with a solid just base, and it feels like they just like knock them Legos over, and they're just like, let me show you what I can do though. And it's like, no, you were doing good. What are you doing? Now, in regards to characters, I think Scarlett Johansson does okay. Like, if you've seen Black Widow in the other movies, she doesn't do anything different here that she hasn't done in other films. Heck, I'd say even her performance in Endgame as this character is way better than it is here. Here it feels like she's kind of just phoning it in. Like she's doing the job, but it's not like, you know, she's doing it as good as she has in the past. And in fact, the other thing too that is interesting about this film is that for this movie to be called Black Widow, it seems to have Selena syndrome, where Black Widow is not really the all-star of this film, even though it's named after her. If anything, it's about like Black Widow and the crew, because we have a lot of characters here that are tied to Black Widow who, when they're on screen, seem to be, you know, running the show. Which is what I mean in regards to that this isn't really the Scarlett Johansson show. It starts out that way, but as soon as Florence Pugh is introduced, she is acting circles around Scarlett Johansson. It's not even because she's just a better actress. I think Scarlett Johansson can be good when she has the right direction and so on and so forth. I think what it is that Florence Pugh is given a way more personality than Black Widow's ever had. You know, Black Widow's very kind of stoic and, you know, mysterious. That's kind of her thing, but at the same time it means that she doesn't really get a lot of time to really be nothing more than the sarcastic female lead in a lot of these Avengers movies, where her personality is, I say sarcastic comments from time to time. Versus Florence Pugh, you feel like there's a lot to her, you know, playing Yelena. She has a lot of depth. There's times where she's sad, there's times where she's angry, there's times where she's joking around, you know, she feels really like a person, even though she's also this hardened like spy killer. Like you feel like at the moment's notice she could snap a neck and then still crack a joke and you'll laugh, you know. And I don't ever get that with Scarlett Johansson, both in this movie or any of the other Avengers films. So I feel like here Florence Pugh does an amazing job. In fact, she is my favorite part of the entire film. And you know, the way this movie ends, it kind of sets her up to be in more stuff in the Marvel Universe. So I'm looking forward to seeing her in more movies or Disney Plus shows, whatever they do with that character. I'm sure that she's going to be phenomenal. The other people too are David Harbour and Rachel Weisz. They play two characters. David Harbour plays Red Guardian, aka Alexei, and Rachel Weisz plays Melina, I believe. And the two of them, you know, they're all right. They're pretty decent. And again, they have personality. They feel like people. Like, they feel like they're just Russian people, Russian spies who, yes, they are killers and they will easily kill somebody. But that doesn't mean they can't still, like, be fun. And I think that's the best thing about their characters and how they're utilized in this film. However, one major criticism, if I have one, is the accents. The Russian accents are awful. Indeed. Florence Pugh's one is probably the best, and even then, her accent comes in and out a lot. Like, they are not good with the Russian accents in this movie. David Harbour's one is kind of cartoony. Rachel Weisz, hers is just all over the place. And it's like y'all, whoever's the accent coach, y'all should have worked with them longer because they did not do as good a job with the Russian accents. I would get on Scarlett Johansson about hers, but she don't have one, and she hasn't since she's been introduced in these movies, and I understand now why, because she's just not good at it. But overall, they do a great job. They're fine. The biggest weaknesses of this movie is easily the villains. They are either wasted or so cartoony it's hard to believe them in their roles. The main bad guy, he's like okay at best. He's just like, he feels like a Bond villain who's just like conniving and twist the mustache, I rule the world. And you're just like, all right, dude, like, in a movie where there's so much depth in regards to them behind, the themes that are kind of behind Black Widow, in regards to the idea of like taking these girls and turning them into killing machines against their will, you would think that the villain would have more depth, but he don't. And granted, that's maybe because they were like, we don't really know who we want to be the villain, because Black Widow doesn't really have villains. She is not like a Tony Stark or like a Spider-Man. She doesn't really have like this huge rogues gallery to pick from, so they had to just find somebody. But he's not pretty good at all as a villain. And Taskmaster, who they were really trying to big up in the trailers as being maybe the main villain, or at the very least the main threat, he's completely wasted here. He's not a very well done, I think, version of Taskmaster. They try, they get the basics down of a villain whose power it is to mimic the moves and fighting styles of whoever it is they're fighting. And I think the way they also go about doing that, their explanation on how Taskmaster mimics the moves, really cool. I thought that was very unique. But the problem is just that they're barely in the movie, and the few fights they do have don't really amount to much. They very much just like fight for a little bit, and then that person either escapes or Taskmaster is like put somewhere else, and then it's like, all right, fight's over. And I'm like, all right, okay. Speaking of the fights, let's talk about the action sequences too for a minute, because again, that first half, solid action sequences. It's filmed very well. It's very clear. There's one in particular between, and you've seen it in the trailers, where it's between Florence Pugh and Scarlett Johansson. That action sequence easily is, I think, my favorite. It's really well done. The fight choreography looks solid, and you really feel like they are like hurting each other. Like, it is really good. And then after that, it just gets, each fight sequence gets worse and worse and worse as it goes on. I think there's only one more after that with like a prison break kind of scenario that I was like, all right, that's kind of cool. And there was like some great banter between the characters. But even then, I still don't think it was as good as the Black Widow Florence Pugh fight, or Yelena fight. I'll try to refer to her by her character, but it's hard. But after that, all the action sequences are just like close shots, barely can tell what's going on. There's one with Rachel Weisz, for example, where she's supposed to like kick butt. You can barely tell what happens between Rachel Weisz and fighting these characters. It is almost unintelligible what happened. It's just like 1 minute she's standing up and other people are standing up, and the next she's standing up and they're on the ground, and you're just like, like I was hoping to see her, kick some butt, but I guess she wasn't there to do the stunt choreography that day. I don't know. It's just the way it's filmed. It just feels like they're covering too much, and you don't really get to see what's going on. And it's like in a movie called Black Widow, where she doesn't have superpowers, so you got to rely on that action. That is key and pivotal to the story. They don't really do a lot with it, as much as I think they could have. And the ending of this is just so ridiculous. As far as like the ending action sequence, it is so insane. It's just like, all right, like, okay. And I know this makes it seem like I didn't like the movie. I did enjoy the movie. All right, I did enjoy the film. It wasn't awful. I just think it's one of those things where, all this time, all this hype, people have been asking for a Black Widow movie. And while it did exceed my expectations in some manners, in a lot of ways, it still also met certain ones I had for other things too. And I'm going to be honest, like, I watched it. I don't think I'll ever watch this Marvel movie again. It's definitely not like Thor 2 levels of bad, which Thor 2 even was like okay at best. It wasn't awful, but that story also felt like it just was kind of just going through the motions, and this one kind of feels the same way once it's that second half. That second half really kind of drops the ball of like, keeping the intrigue and the mystery of the spy thriller going, and trade off of just like huge action set pieces. And I don't think it was a fair trade, to be quite honest. I really wish they had gone the route of like Winter Soldier, where they kind of stayed in the pocket a little bit, because even Winter Soldier's ending was kind of big, but it felt like it was staying pretty close, like, staying still pretty on the level. This one just wasn't hitting the same way.
For a grade, I'd definitely give this a C. I think it's okay, but it could have definitely been better. Definitely better.
If you like Black Widow, you'll enjoy it. I think it'll be a fun time. Even though she's not like, despite her name being top billing, she's not like really the main one kind of doing a lot of the acting heavy lifting. It's really on the entire ensemble that's doing a lot of the acting heavy lifting. But for the most part, I think if you're a Black Widow fan, you will enjoy it. You will have a good time with it. I just think, though, it's like one of those things where, again, she's the character with no powers. So, they have to do a lot around her to make her, from an action standpoint, a lot bigger. And they just, I think they could have took some cues from Atomic Blonde or even John Wick. I think that would have made this story a lot better and made the intrigue of like wanting to watch this film a lot better. But who knows? It's Marvel. I feel like they did this movie as like a obligation of like, we never did a Black Widow movie. Scarlett Johansson's not going to be in these movies anymore. So, might as well, better late than never. But I'm not interested in another one. Unless Florence Pugh's the main character. If they do another Black Widow movie and Florence Pugh's the main character, Yelena's the main character, I'm in. She's phenomenal. She's great. And I look forward to seeing her in the Marvel Universe going forward. So that's it. So, that's my thoughts. Comment below, tell me what you thought about the Black Widow movie if you've seen it. If you haven't seen it, what are you most excited about seeing it? Or if you're not excited to see it, also comment below, tell me why you're not excited to see it. You might be like me. I wasn't into it. You might be pleasantly surprised. You never know. And also, if you want to find more First Ones to Die content, whether that be our podcast or videos here on YouTube, follow us at The First Ones to Die on all of our YouTube and social media links. You can find us on Facebook, Twitters, Instagrams. Find the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all the good stuff. And don't forget to also favorite, like, and subscribe. Yeah. So, till next time, see you later, guys.